After a few days more, the people of Bhubaneswar began to visit Srila Prabhupada. One evening, he was in a room speaking with several men, and one of them asked, "Well, Swamiji, actually, what is God?" Srila Prabhupada opened his eyes widely in disbelief. "What is this?" he said. "You are from India and you do not know what is God? This is the degradation of Kali Yuga." Prabhupada gets, who can imagine? Well, Prabhupada rode in his car to the park for his morning walk. He saw billboards and banners announcing that Sanjay Gandhi was coming to town. Sanjay Gandhi's particular political platform was that everyone should become literate. Looking out the window at the poor, barren land, Prabhupada said, "What is the benefit of literacy when the people are poor and starving?" He said that the local people were coming to the ISKCON evening program just to get a little khichdi, not because it was prasadam, but because they were hungry. So after many years of education, they learned to read, but still earned little money and had the same employment, and what was the benefit? Life was not for such education. Prabhupada lamented that so much land was lying uncultivated. Seeing several men jogging, Prabhupada commented that most people were hungry and poor, while a few were living in big houses, overeating and running to lose fat. So he will educate the people, Srila Prabhupada said, and after some time they will join the Naxalite movement and kill the rich man. No, everyone should be engaged in working the land. Prabhupada said his ISKCON men should also work, because unless they were properly engaged, they would gossip and fall victim to sex desire. Since arriving in Bhubaneswar, Srila Prabhupada had several times talked about going to Jagannath Puri, about an hour away. Since he had hopes of one day building a big center in Puri, he wanted to see some plots of land for sale. He hadn't been to Puri, he said, since 1958. Since his Western disciples were not allowed to enter the Jagannath temple, Prabhupada said he would not enter either, but he would go to Puri to see what land was available. Early one morning, Prabhupada set out in his car for Puri on the Bay of Bengal. He looked at several properties there, but either their locations were poor, or the buildings were deteriorated, or both. Prabhupada walked along the beach with his men, and the surf was pounding. "I was jumping here," he laughed. "In 1920 or 21, I came here. At that time, I was married. I was married in 1918. I came after appearing for my BA examination, and because I was jubilant, I was jumping. When the waves came, I was jumping. Now it is 57 years after. They say we do not change bodies, but where is that body? Now I am walking with stick, then I was jumping. I am still here, I remember, but the body has changed. What is the difficulty to understand? I am the same, otherwise how I am remembering all these things? But that body is now lost. Tata dehantara prapti. Why this simple philosophy these rascals cannot understand?" Srila Prabhupada stayed a day at the beachside tourist bungalow, and one of his godbrothers, Shamasundar Brahmachari from the local Purushottam Gaudiya Math, visited. After he left, Sri Sevas Shivarat, a member of the Pujari committee of the Jagannath temple, also came to visit. Prabhupada spoke to him about the possibility of ISKCON devotees entering the Jagannath temple. To bar the Western Vaishnavas from entering the temple was prejudice and ignorant. Since the members of the Krishna conscious movement were fully engaged in spiritual life, they should not be considered unfit simply because of their birth, status, or race. Seva Shiva Rat was friendly and agreed with Srila Prabhupada. He promised he would do what he could to help. He also told Prabhupada about a book he had just published and invited him to attend a small pandal meeting the next evening at which the book would be inaugurated. Prabhupada agreed. Later, while Prabhupada was sitting on the veranda outside his room at the tourist bungalow, as he sat watching Shantilal preparing lunch in the back of Gargamuni's van, he could smell the aromatic spices cooking in the ghee. He called to Gargamuni Swami and asked him that a plate of Shantilal's cooking be brought to him. Soon, Prabhupada was enjoying a meal of rice, dal, puris, spicy sabjis, and chutney. He said that Shantilal cooked wonderfully, and that all devotees in ISKCON should learn this art. If the meat eaters could take such prasadam, he said, they would give up their sinful habit. As Prabhupada sat in his hotel room that evening with a few disciples at his feet, he reminisced about how he had come to America in 1965 and had suffered 2 heart attacks at sea. They say that anyone who gets a 3rd heart attack, said Prabhupada, they must expire. I had 2 attacks on the ship and then in New York a 3rd one. Paralyzed. Left side was paralyzed. I do not know how I was saved. And one girl, that captain's wife, she studied astrology. She said, Swami, if you can survive your 70th year, then you will live for 100 years. Srila Prabhupada and his disciples laughed. So Prabhupada continued, somehow or other, I have survived my 70th year. I do not know whether. They say I will live 100 years, but 70th year was severe. 3 heart attacks and paralysis, and I was without any family. At that time, none of you were with me. I was alone. I wasn't dependent on anyone. But on the ship, I saw Krishna was going to save me. I was going for his mission. Srila Prabhupada ki. We're going for his mission. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, 4th Chapter, Text 24. Vidura approaches Maitreya. Satam Maha Bhagavatam. Satang Maha Bhagavatam. Vrajantam Kauravashabha. Vrajantam Kauravashabha. Vishrambhad abhyadate dang. Vishrambhad abhyadate dang. Mukyam Krishna parigrahe. Mukyam Krishna parigrahe. Please chant. Satang Maha Bhagavatam. Vrajantam Kauravashabha. Vishrambhara Vyadate Dang. Mukyam Krishna parigrahe. Satang Maha Bhagavatam. Vrajantam Kauravashabha. Vishrambhara Vyadate Dang. Mukyam Krishna parigrahe. Satang Maha Bhagavatam. Vrajantam Kauravashabha. Vishrambhara Vyadate Dang. Mukyam Krishna parigrahe. Satang Maha Bhagavatam. Vrajantam Kauravashabha. Vishrambhara Vyadate Dang. Mukyam Krishna parigrahe. Ladies. Satang Maha Bhagavatam. Vrajantam Kauravashabha. Vishrambhara Vyadate Dang. Mukhyan Krishna Parigrahe Satang Mahabhagavatam Rishjantam Kauravashivaha Vrishambhara Vidatedam Mukhyan Krishna Parigrahe Saham Vidura Tam unto Uddhava Mahabhagavatam, the great devotee of the Lord, Vrajantam, while going, Gaurava Rishabhaha, the best amongst the Kauravas, Vishrambhat, out of confidence, Abhyadatta, submitted, Idam, this, Mukhyam, unto the chief, Krishna, Lord Krishna, Parigrahe, in devotional service to the Lord. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. While Uddhava, the chief and most confidential amongst the devotees of the Lord, was going away, Vidura, in affection and confidence, questioned him. Please repeat. While Uddhava, the chief and most confidential amongst the devotees of the Lord, was going away, Vidura, in affection and confidence, questioned him. Purport. Vidura was much older than Uddhava. By family relationship, Uddhava was a contemporary brother of Krishna's, while Vidura was as elderly as Krishna's father, Vasudeva. But although junior by age, Uddhava was much advanced in the devotional service of the Lord, and therefore he is described herein as the chief amongst the devotees of the Lord. Vidura was confident about this, and thus he addressed Uddhava in that higher category. That is the way of courteous dealings between two devotees. Om Jnana Tamrandasya Granjana Slakaya Chakshurama Tamina Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Mankate Gurum Yat Kipatamaham Vande Shri Gurum Dhiratanam. This is a very poignant point that Prabhupada is bringing up here. I remember one lecture in Mayapur where the scenario is that all the demigods are surrounding Lord Nrsingadev after the gruesome demise of Hiranyakashipu. And everyone is fearful. No one can approach the Lord. And the description given of the Lord is, of course, amazing. Prabhupada emphasizes the Lord's pointy ears, and his visage, his appearance can basically burn the entire universe just by that. And everyone has seen some example of that when you see two lions fight. The look on the faces, well, it's meant to instill fear in the opponent as well. So everyone was fearful to approach. So finally they pushed Prahlad Maharaj forward, just a 5-year-old boy. So at that point, Srila Prabhupada commented that all these senior personalities, demigods like Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, the goddess of fortune, nobody could dare to approach Lord Nrsingadev. So Prabhupada said, as it was mentioned here, that it is not by seniority, it is by sincerity. So this is the secret, you can say. And Prabhupada has mentioned this on many occasions, that sincerity is the main ingredient for success in spiritual life, and not by academic scholarship, some ability to speak words in a flowery way just to please an audience. There are so many of those examples in India. But we have no confidence in them. This is the point. You know, just like when you see a person play acting on TV or in the movies, they may be in the role of a historical character, but they don't always have the same demeanor. And so it is not convincing. So this is the point about the content of a person's character is what is necessary in order to properly present and represent the philosophy and the parampara. You cannot just be a joker. My friend Komarupa, his favorite word for addressing such persons was, they're just jokers. You know, and joker is not a very flattering term when it's used in that context. You know, a joker could be someone who is makes a show amongst his friends, or someone on the stage. But someone who is a joker, he's a pretender. You know, and we understand what is the implication, the import of that. And so it is not a very flattering term. So by all means, we should avoid becoming some show bottle joker. We dress like Vaishnavas. We have to comport ourselves as Vaishnavas. You know, we have opportunities to make a great impact in the public at large. You know, of course, there are time and circumstances. You know, just as the title of that Leelamrita, Chant Hare Krishna and fight. Fight doesn't always mean some pugilistic, some physical fight. Fight mostly means we're fighting Maya. Fighting against Maya, against the Maya bodies, against the Mayic influence that pervades the material world. That is our primary engagement, our primary fight, our primary target. Right? There are many secondary targets. But our primary target involves our self-purification in order to be effective. It's like a doctor. You don't go to a first-year medical student and ask him to perform an operation on you. Would anybody do that? You would want the most experienced person who has done hundreds of the same operation. And then you would have confidence that every one of his patients so far has survived. And therefore I can put myself into that person's hands with confidence. Just as we see that Vidura, Maitreya, is putting himself in the hands of Uddhava, although Uddhava is his junior, right? And Vidura, rather, it is Vidura. So this is, and Vidura is not some uneducated personality, right? He understands the ways of polity, of politics. You know, we can, the example he gives in leaving the palace is all for the right reasons. To the extent that his integrity was challenged, he stood up for that point. So that means he was a person of character. And ultimately, in the final measure, character is all a person has. And they sometimes it is, the materialists, they have their saying, character is what you do or how you act when no one is looking. That is character. Not that you have a certain character when there's an audience and and then you devolve into your whatever base character when you're no longer visible to others. We've seen such persons like that. Right? That goes back to that Joker term. So by all means, we should be genuine. We're not on the platform of Uddhava in this regard, obviously. But yet, many times the devotees of the Krishna conscious movement have been put into situations where they're in the presence of much, much more senior persons, so-called spiritually, so-called materially. Just that we were speaking about Bhubaneswar here, in Leelamrita and Jagannath Puri. One year we had a similar incident where we wanted to enter. We had previously gone into the home of Ramananda Roy. It's a place of pilgrimage. It's a sacred place. Discussions between Lord Chaitanya and Ramananda Roy took place at that location. And one year we went back and there was a new sign, said, only Hindus allowed. Only Hindus allowed. We were surprised. We've been here before. But it's basically, it became under the management of the Puri, whatever you want to call them. So we decided, being young Americans and a little bit, rebellious, we just marched right in. Right up to the diorama. Because Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, this was previously like a Gaudiya Mata facility. We don't know how it escaped from the Gaudiya Mata. It became under the Puri management. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was very keen on dioramas. So there's one diorama when you come in the gate and enter to the right of Ramananda Roy and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sitting and discussing these pastimes. So we all went up to that, and it's up on a plinth. It's raised, and then the courtyard is a little bit, is ground level. We all went up and we paid our obeisances. And towards the back of the compound, there were a bunch of, people. We didn't know who they were. It looked like workers. They were husking banana stalks because it was the time of harvest, and just next door is the Jagannath Vallabha, the gardens, filled with banana trees. All belongs to the deity. So they were husking bananas. And all of a sudden they became very animated and agitated and loud and started screaming that we have defiled the compound and that we would have to pay a huge monetary sum in order to purify it. So we began to just march out of the compound. We didn't want to engage with them. And they shut the doors and wouldn't let us out. So this became a little interesting at that point. It was all the New York brahmacharis plus Bhagavat. Gaur Govinda Maharaj had not come inside. He was outside. No, but we were with Gaur Govinda Maharaj and Bhagavat Prabhu and all the New York brahmacharis. And we thought, okay, we don't want any trouble, we'll just sit down. They said, we're going to call the police. I said, all right, we'll wait. Waiting 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, we said. Bhagavat became a little apprehensive. Not quite paranoid yet, but borderline. And then he said, they must be bringing people here to beat us up. I said, I don't think so. There's 15 of us. He said, no. We have to go get help. I said, well, the door is locked. So in India, they have two-door system. One is the big door that elephants can walk through, basically. And then there's a small door called a criki that people can pass in and out. You have to step up, open the door, step up over because it's not ground level. It's just you open it like I don't know what you want to call it, like a half door, but you have to step over and then you can go out. You have to stick your head through first and then walk out. So Bhagavat made a run for this gate and he got the criki open and he dove head first through the criki. But at that time, Bhagavat was quite large and he became stuck in the criki. But then we could see that somebody was pulling from the other side, and these little guys who had trapped us in here were pulling on this side, pulling his legs. So he was like stuck there. So we ran up to those guys who were pulling, and we threw them off. And of course, we pushed Bhagavad out. And then they shut the quickie and they started fighting, and we started fighting. And of course, that ended very quickly because we subdued them. And we told them very sternly, if the police are not here in 5 minutes, we will continue to teach you a lesson. And sure enough, in 5 minutes, the police were there. And the police escorted us to the chowki, which was literally 100 yards down the road. And then we sat in the chowki, and there the police were, because usually the police are in on these type of schemes, they get a cut. Somebody's at the door, see if anyone is available to open. The ladies would. So we sat down and we just engaged in very cordial conversation with the police. And then after 15, 20 minutes, Bhagavad came back with a letter from some minister. He had been preaching there for a long time. Gaur Govinda Maharaj had been preaching. So he handed over this letter from one of the ministers to the police department. And he said, yeah, you can leave. And interestingly enough, we had a program that evening with all the civil servants of Jagannath Puri. They all belonged to one ashram called the Nigamananda Ashram. And then when we sat down, we gave a nice program. Bhagavad spoke on nectar devotion, and we entertained questions. And then there was a feast. And we sat down in the midst of all these personalities. And I asked one person, and what is your service there? And I'm the finance minister of Orissa. Another person was the minister of religion. Another person was, and we're wondering, I said, we're taking prasadam with you, but we cannot go into these temples? And they were like, yes, it's very difficult because they're a whole parallel system with the pandas and the government. But basically, they made excuses that they couldn't do. And still, to this day, we cannot go into the Jagannath temple. But it is just an illustration of the fact that, we're doing this service, and we're not going to say that we're qualified. But under the circumstances, we were representing the parampara adequately by our behavior. We weren't creating unnecessary troubles. We were very respectful. And we'd been holding these programs all around to these different people with these high-level government people, and they all appreciated it. But still, they were helpless to do anything to allow us in. And when we were at Puri, we also saw the hotel where Prabhupada stayed in his bungalow. So it was very nice to be there under the circumstances and to remember Srila Prabhupada. And this remembrance, of course, this is ultimately what Uddhava is doing with regard to Vidura, because he's competent to relate and put into perspective all what has happened up to this point. A very tumultuous time, the departure of Lord Krishna for his own abode. In one sense, this is not a very happy, joyful situation. Arjuna comes back after 7 months away, completely dejected, and by his presence, everyone becomes dejected. So, it's a very morose situation. But the lesson is there that such devotees like Uddhava carry the Lord within their hearts. And wherever they go, they bring about this revelation that Krishna is here. He has not left. And that leaving is just to bewilder the materialists. And we also understand. As a matter of fact, there was a nice, where was that? Some devotee sent this morning, very nice. Prabhupada speaking in 1966. Amazing. 1968, Los Angeles. Prabhupada's lecturing on Bhagavad Gita. So somebody is questioning. I read somewhere in your writings that in order to understand the confidential affairs of Radha and Krishna, one must serve the Gopis, who are servants. One must serve the Gopis, and who are servants of the Gopis. How do I serve the servants of the Gopis? Gopi Bhartu Pada Kamaliratas. So Prabhupada replies, Gopis, they are not conditioned souls. They are liberated spirits. So first of all, you have to come out from this conditioned life. Then the question of serving Gopi will come. Don't be at the present moment very eager to serve Gopi. Just try to get out of your conditional life. Then time will come when you'll be able to serve Gopi. In this conditional stage, we cannot serve anything. Krishna is performing it. But Krishna gives us opportunities to accept service in this Archa Marg. Just like we keep the deity of Krishna, offer prasadam under regulation, under principle. So we have to make advancement in this way, this chanting, hearing and worshiping in the temple, arti, offering prasadam. In this way, as we make advancement, then automatically Krishna will reveal to you, and you'll understand your position. Gopis means who are always, constantly engaged in the service of the Lord. So that eternal relationship will be revealed. So we have to wait for that. Immediately we cannot imitate serving Gopis. That's a good idea that we shall serve Gopi, but it will take time, not immediately. Immediately we have to follow the rules and regulation and routine work. And still this question arises. You know, that's why patience is one of the principles for advancement in spiritual life. One does not artificially think, I need to know my spiritual form, my siddhadeha now. This is a foolish, consideration. Who has such false confidence in his spiritual life that he thinks he's ready for that, to understand that? What would he do with that? Who can imagine? But yet some people are pursuing this still, thinking that I am qualified. And because he thinks he's qualified, therefore he is unqualified. You understand that? Because he thinks he is qualified, therefore he is not qualified. So in any case, let's read this verse again. While Uddhava, the chief and most confidential amongst the devotees of the Lord, was going away, Vidura in affection and confidence questioned him. Any questions, comments, concerns, corrections? Of course.
The last statement that you're making about what you read of Prabhupada about the Gopis, and I had a comment about that also, like, if you're unqualified, one thing is, let's say you have a male form and your spiritual form happens to be female, but you have a female form currently in the material world, your spiritual form happens to be male. So if you try to meditate on the opposite sex, it's just going to produce the wrong thing. And it can, let's say if someone tries to reveal to you and somehow they know and they reveal to you, it wouldn't really help you in spiritual life. And secondly, the people should have faith that the transcendental system works, that when they are ready, it will be delivered, and that, Prabhupada and the Parampara can make that happen.
Yashadevi parabhaktir yata deve tatagaro. Implicit faith in the spiritual master in Krishna. Everything will be revealed to those who are sincerely. If someone is thinking that I need this information now, he must consider it, whether or not he has fully surrendered. Prabhupada also said in Mayapur, that word sarvatmana, it defined, and in many places, not just in Mayapur, if you search that term in database, it comes up repeatedly. Prabhupada references. Sarvatmana means full surrender, heart and soul, no reservation. So you can see from self-examination, do I fit that description? Am I fully surrendered, my heart and soul? I have nothing, not a tinge of selfish desires. Where is that? But, we can continue. And along this path, Tatenu Kampam Sustamikshama, we will, if we behave as the obedient son, then we will automatically inherit what the Father has in his possession. We understand that the spiritual master is not an ordinary soul who comes, simply just to deliver an alternate view on Vedic philosophy, amongst many. No, the pure divine, and this is what a lot of people stumble upon, and then they think, let me go away from this. Bhakti Chumaj had a very strong standing order amongst his disciples: never leave ISKCON. ISKCON is the ship. It is the vehicle. There may be so many need to maintain that ship. That is there, without doubt. But that is our duty. We don't abandon the ship. Right? But some people think, no, I haven't abandoned the ship has abandoned me. That's a foolishness that we hear many times. They use it politically and socially, things like that. But if one looks into his heart very carefully, of course, some people may say that, well, I don't have that same relationship as you, Prabhu, you're Srila Prabhupada's disciple, this and that. This is all just excuses, There's, who is Prabhupada on the Vyasasana, right here, on that Vyasasana, on 55th Street in 1976. He said that the grandfather sometimes is more merciful than the father. So everyone's grandfather is Srila Prabhupada. So how you cannot take shelter as well? But he's not your father. He's your grandfather. But he said, no, he is your merciful. So that analogy applies whether it's the grandfather, the great-grandfather. At times we sometimes take shelter. When we're reading, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's various essays, it demands intense concentration and all of your intellectual focus. But if you are sincere, you can understand. And why not? Because this is our family. It's like we have that book, Our Family Business. So this is all our family, and I'm happy to be a part of this family. I wouldn't give it up unnecessarily. What's the point? Who's thinking? Does anyone say that? I gave up my mother and father. Let me go to another mother and father. No. Ram Roy Prabhu has a question. Or a correction. A contribution.
Srila Prabhupada's disciple Gita Das recently left his body, and Siddhanta Prabhu, who's making Prabhupada Memories, collection of all of the memoirs of Srila Prabhupada's disciples. He posted an hour and 20-minute long video, which I believe was made in 2007. Gita Prabhu spent the last weeks in Srila Prabhupada had been down in 1977. And in regards to what you were saying
Yes, Chaitanya.
You're saying that Krishna leaving this world is only to bewildered atheists, and that he's still here. So does that mean that his pastime is still being performed here, and certain devotees could see that, or what does that mean?
Well, for those who have achieved that level of super consciousness, Krishna is always there in Vrindavan. He never leaves Vrindavan. Goloka and Gokul are described as non-different, but the ability to see them is dependent on us, on our realization. The Brahma Samhita makes it it describes it, and intellectually we can appreciate it, philosophically we can appreciate it, but practically to understand, it's very tricky. It's like being able to see in the fourth dimension. You know, you can't see. Sometimes there's some science fiction where there's a parallel dimension and it exists all around you, but you cannot see it. It exists simultaneously, but you cannot see it. But it is there, and it's as real as this is to us, and this is not real either. But as real as this is to us, the spiritual world is always real. It is the only reality, and it exists there eternally. You know, there's dissolution, there's this, there's that, but when Krishna descends, he descends in that location. These pastimes are going on in Gokul, which is not different from Goloka, but performed in Boma Leela, so-called Boma, earthly pastimes. You know, someday we'll have that vision, but be patient. Be patient. Mataji has a question.
Thank you, Hamsarupa, for the class. While you were speaking about Jagannath Puri and the devotees who were not allowed to enter into the temple, I just started to wonder about something. Maybe it's silly, but I want to share, or I would like to know what the underlying background is of the following. So I was thinking about how Haridas Thakur, being a Muslim, so-called lower caste, how he never went to Jagannath Puri. I was thinking about Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu questioned him why he didn't go, and he said, "Oh no, I belong to lower caste, I don't want to go." And somehow Lord Chaitanya became very pleased. And he brought him the prashadam from Jagannath Puri. So I was wondering, why did Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu not encourage him to go or open doors for him? And I thought, was out of respect for the humility for Haridas Thakur? Was it because of Haridas Thakur's desire to go there was not so strong? So maybe you can elaborate a little bit on this, if you'd like to.
Well, Haridas Thakur is Haridas Thakur, Lord Brahma. Certainly he was setting a certain example, but from the purport of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, we understood that the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, would visit him daily. So that was a different situation than the one that we might have. We could also satisfy ourselves and say that, well, we have darshan of Sri Sri Radha Govinda all the time, externally and internally. And whatever the social and political situation was at that time, Lord Chaitanya chose not to upset that. And so, that time and circumstances here, we know that Srila Prabhupada wanted his disciples to go into the temple of Jagannath Puri, but they were being held back. And he had a different reason, because Prabhupada's reason was that this purification process, which is delineated in the Vedas, which should be understood by so-called spiritualists, it's clear that those who have accepted the purificatory process are as good as those, or better than those, who are so-called Brahmins. But of course, they couldn't understand that, and if they did, then they didn't want to acknowledge it because it would upset their situation, and they would have to be relegated to a so-called inferior situation. That if anybody can become a Vaishnava, then anybody can become a Panda, and that would certainly disturb their monopoly on that very lucrative situation.
Caste Brahman is kind of, the Jati Gosais and the Caste Brahman is similar.
Same. Prabhupada has condemned this, but it's not our position to condemn, but yet he Prabhupada gave us hints that at some point, he said, Lord Jagannath will come to our temple. And of course he has, to many of our temples. But he also meant in Jagannath Puri. So, and Prabhupada's words have always come true. Right, Mataji?
Just a couple of stories about Puri.
A couple of stories about Puri? Okay.
My first daughter was born in Mayapur, and when she was about 6 months old, we took her to Puri, and I also took my maid, who was a nice Vaishnava, and she had tilak and everything, and I knew I couldn't go in to the temple, so I asked her, could you take her into the temple? And she said, yeah. And then the Pandits stopped the maid and said, the little girl can't come in. And then I'm like, she's born in Mayapur, she's only heard chanting. And they said, oh, another reason why you can't come in is you're wearing tilak. That means ISKCON, and that means you were Christians, you were born Christians. Okay, and then I wanted to get into the Gundicha temple, and I can speak Bengali quite well. And he said, oh yeah, you can come in, and then he conferred with someone else and said, wrong color. Another thing is that my African and African American devotees, they can go in.
Yeah, many went in.
Yeah, because they're just looking at the color.
Yeah.
They're not looking at everything else.
Yeah, many devotees who are a few shades of melatonin darker get in, and we've heard many stories like that. That's certainly one advantage. Maybe we should put that on our flyer. You get to see Lord Jagannath in his original form. But yes, we're not concerned so much, that wasn't and our situation weren't that we were trying to get into a disagreement with them. We just thought, that, we've been here before, and it was actually at the urging of, our guide, you can say, that we should just go on in, ignore that sign. And so,
Now
this.
a wonderful place has been put there in front of the Jagannath temple, and it's a wonderful place to do Sankirtan. A lot of the shops are down now. The people who do Sankirtan at ISKCON, those who do Sankirtan in front of the Jagannath temple are ISKCON devotees.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, Prabhu? Can you give the mic to our guest?
Thank you for the class. I just wanted to make a comment. I'm from India and I'm born Telugu.
Are you from Puri?
I'm not from Puri, I'm from New Delhi. But in my undergraduate, I did not know who is Lord Jagannath at that time because in India, in Delhi, we worship Krishna more like so I went at a conference in Bhubaneswar. And as part of that, my classmates and I and our professor took us to Puri because he studied near Puri. And then we went there and we, of course, were allowed in the temple. And I did not know that this is the situation there. But then the pandas there, they would not, they give that blessing from your head. And that they would not do that until we paid them money.
Yeah,
And
of course.
We were poor undergrad students and we did not have a lot of money. And then they were like, we were like very disappointed that what is this business here instead of the Lord with that. So just wanted to make the point that even if you are privileged, and then of course after that, many years later, like just a few years back, I came to know that Jagannath is same as Krishna. And so then only it was like, wow, okay. And the point being that it is, even if you're from there, it is hard to get the mercy of the Lord from that. And this is even better, that what you were just explaining earlier, that Krishna is in your heart and worshipping that and looking for Krishna and everybody else's heart is more important than that.
Thank you for that comment. Any other questions? Then Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.
Grace Hamsarupa Pr
Boo.
SB.